Welcome back. Today is going to be our final day of this section 5.3. So today we're going to move on from factoring. So I've taught you 4 different ways to factor. However, the cool thing is there is one final way that we can learn to solve all these polynomial expressions. And that is actually getting the graphing calculator to do the work for you, to graph it and have it calculate it for you. There is one downside though. The one thing the calculator can't show you is if there's any imaginary or complex solutions. So that's why we can't solely let you do this method, because it's not going to show you everything. If there are imaginary solutions, they will not be represented on the graph. However, for the most part, it is a very nice, clean method for finding all of these zeros. So if you have a graphing calculator handy, I'd highly recommend have it out with you and be following my steps as I'm showing you in this video. If you don't have one, all of these steps here are going to be exactly what you need, exactly what I'm showing you, and it'll kind of give you the recall of what I'm doing. So when you come back to class and have to do it, hopefully it can help step you through it again. So if I'm trying to solve a polynomial using the graphing calculator, the first thing I have to do is actually graph it. So I go to my graphing menu and I type in the function. So in this case, x squared plus 2x minus 7. All right, and graph. So there's my graph. Now what we're looking for, the solutions, I've already alluded to this earlier, the solutions are talking about the x-intercepts or the zeros. So the solutions we're looking for are the points that it crosses the x-axis. Those are where the function is 0, and often very important points when it comes to graphing. So let's take a look at how can I get the calculator to do these for me. Just like when we were doing the minimums and maximums, it is going to be in the calculate feature. So second trace to get into that menu, and we're going to be looking for the zeros. And again, in class, I'll be using terms like solutions, roots, zeros, x-intercepts. All of those mean the same thing. So in this instance, you're going to have to know that the calculator references them as zeros. So I go down to the 0, and it's going to give me exactly the same prompts as when we found the maximums and minimums. It's going to want me to go to the left of the point. So I'm going to focus on the left-hand one first. So I'm going to scroll till I'm left of the point and to the right of the point. Or when you're doing these zeros, basically you just have to make sure your cursor crosses the axis. So sometimes it's easier to think of above and below instead of right and left. But when you surround it, hit enter one more time, and right here it gives you the x value of the 0. This x value is going to be about negative 3.83. You're only going to get decimals. It'll never give you an exact value. So we have our first 0, but in this case there's 2 of them. I have this one on the right hand side as well. So I have to go back and do those same steps. Go back, start the 0 command all over again. Now I'm going to scroll over and I'm going to work on my other one. So here I'm to the left of it. You just keep scrolling right until I cross it. So there's my 2 bounds. Hit enter one more time. And here it gives me the other one, about 1.83. So when I ask for the zeros, those are the points I want you to put. Or here, I actually already labeled them out for you. But that's what I'm going to be looking for. Here's another function. So it's going to be the same process, but this time I think you can already tell it crosses the axis 3 times. So we're going to have to go through this process 3 times to get all of them. So I'm going to go back to my calculator. I'm going to clear it, and I'm going to put in that new function, x cubed minus 4x squared. Oh, didn't hit the squared. There we go. Minus x plus 5. So I'm going to graph my new function. And here are the 3 points at which it crosses. So let's go and find them. Calculate down to 0. I'm going to start with this one, the far left. So I'm to the left. I'm going to scroll right until I cross over the axis. So I have one above and one below. Hit enter one more time. There we go. X equals about negative 1.09. So that's going to be my first 0. My first 0 is when x equals negative 1.09. Let's go back and find the next 0. You have to do this for every time it crosses. Scroll over. So here I'm sitting to the left of it. Keep scrolling right until you cross it. This next one is at 1.16. So I'm going to write that down. 1.16. And my final one, have to go through that process again, go back to 0. So here to the left, scroll right until it crosses, hit enter one more time, and then you get 3.93. So this is going to be a very powerful method for ones that aren't necessarily factorable, which is a lot of polynomials. I've always tailor-made them to be solvable for you. However, most polynomials, those specifics won't work for. We're going to need the graphing calculators to find those zeros for us. However, this is going to be a really great opportunity to have conversations about everything we've talked about so far. So the rest of the video, I'm going to recap everything we've done so far in this chapter. So remember, way back in the first lesson, we started by naming by degree. So here's a new polynomial, and I want to name it by its degree. Well, here, I'm noticing it's a degree 3. So this is going to be a cubic function, and it has 1, 2, 3 terms. So I'm going to call that a trinomial. We just learned how to find all the zeros. That's what this whole section has been about, that we've spent a week on, graphically and factoring. Well, graphically, we're talking about those x-intercepts, okay, those points right there. Factoring, well, this one is the case where x is everywhere, all right? So if I'm going to solve this by factoring, the first thing I'm going to do is factor an x out. And I'm finding where it equals 0. That's how you find the solutions. So this goes back to our first section, that A section. And now I'm going to factor it. So negative 3 and positive 2 will add to will multiply to negative 6, add to negative 1. Then I find each solution. That gives me a solution of x equals 0. This gives me a solution of x equals 3. That gives me a solution of x equals negative 2. And you can go and see that those are, in fact, the points we were talking about. Right there, negative 2, 0, and 3 that you got from the graph. So the factoring methods line up with exactly what the calculator is telling you as well. We also talked about end behavior. So end behavior, I'm looking at an odd degree polynomial with a positive leading coefficient. So that's going to look something like this. And I know you're looking at the graph, but remember back in that section, I taught you to kind of make that mental picture. Odd positive is going to look like that. And how is it going? Well, it's starting downward and ending upward. Max and mins. Now this is something we're going to have to go back and use the calculator for. This was in that second section of stuff that we covered. So remembering how to do this with a graphing calculator. So I'm going to go back, change my function. So I'm going to input that new one. So x cubed minus x squared minus 6x graph. And now it's asking for the relative maximums and minimums. So remember, those are going to be the points right there and right there that we're going to get the calculator to calculate for us. Whenever we're making these calculations, you have to go into calculate. I'm going to start with a maximum. So I'm going to scroll down to option number 4. So I'm going to start with this point right here. I need to go to the left of it, to the right of it, hit enter one more time, and there it is, negative 1.12. So I'm going to go write that down, negative 1.12, and the y value is 4.06. And I can do the same thing to find the relative minimum. So let's go back, go through that same process, but this time to find the minimum, which is going to be option 3. So I scroll over, making sure I stay to the left, then I move over to the right of it, hit enter one more time. So 1.79 and a y value of negative 8.21. And that pretty much encompasses everything we've done so far in this chapter. So thank you so much for joining me. And again, make sure before you come back to class, take a moment, write that summary for me. Tell me about what we talked about today and how it's fitting in with the rest of the material that I've already taught you. Then come back ready to start your practice work.